Ultimately, all forms of socialism end up devolving into violence and end in absolute mediocrity. And the easiest way to see some of this is to look at what was going on with the Russian Revolution and the following takeover of Marxian socialism there, which evolved to Leninist socialism. And it doesn't really matter what form of socialism you use. It could be utopian, it could be Marxist, it could be National Socialism, even our so-called pacifist social democrats. The end result always going to be the same. So if we look at what's going on during the communist socialist takeover in Russia, 1917 through the early 20s, and please do check out my video talking about uh, National Socialists and fascists being socialists. We talk about all types of socialists in there, and we also get into the in depth into the definitions, so you have a better grasp of what I'm talking about. So when the socialist takes over, what they do is they have to impose themselves on the producers. So as we saw in the burgeoning Soviet Union, you had essentially the party members and their armed thugs come out and forcibly remove the landholders, or basically browbeating them into accepting their new methodologies of running agriculture. Now, if you've ever been involved in agriculture at all, if you've got family members, anything that has to do with farming in any way, shape, or form, especially if it's been multi generational. Okay, so imagine any person you know who's a farmer getting up to do his work one day, and some guy comes in from the city in a suit saying, "Hey, this land's no longer yours, and we're going to bring a bunch of other people in here, and we're going to run it via this new scientific method we came up with via socialism." Well, most farmers are going to resist that because the land they are working, their investment goes far beyond money. If you've ever actually been involved in agriculture, I mean, you literally put sweat and blood into the soil. So it goes far beyond just it being a possession. It's almost as if it were another member of the family, almost like a living being. And so no farmer, owner of his land, is going to willingly put up with this. So your options are going to be kill them, drive them off, or essentially threaten them to the point where they decide to try to cooperate, hoping that somehow they're going to make things work. Same thing happens when you look at any business. You approach the business owner and say, "This is no longer yours. The workers are now running it. Uh, go away, be gone." And you're going to get similar reactions depending on how much the person has put into their business. The more they feel, the more they've put into it, the more likely they're going to resist such a takeover, requiring violence to remove them, or they're going to see the writing on the wall and they're going to flee. So the violence is always going to happen because at some point your socialism forces people beyond the point where they're willing to accept your edicts. They are willing to risk death rather than put up with what's being forced upon them. Now, this leads to the inevitable seeds of the destruction of socialist governments, because once you get rid of all these problematic people, you've just gotten rid of all the people who actually know how to do things efficiently and effectively. Now, many workers might be able to figure out how to do the day-to-day operations of things at their workplace, but there are a whole bunch of different skill sets involved in owning something, and this goes all the way from farms to shop fronts to factories. The thing that socialists hate the most, the dreaded capitalist, the ability to be able to figure out how to invest, how to set up your floor, how to calculate what your starting capital goods are, planning into the future, deciding how fast you can grow based on the economy. That'll, who's buying your stuff, and how fast your profits allow you to expand. That's not something the average worker has rattling around in his head. So socialism replaces this with planning. And as we've seen in history, these plans rarely work. They never meet their goals. And the only way they meet their goals is to retcon the plans to basically change the outcomes and say, hey, look, we met our goal. George Orwell's infamous chocolate ration story from 1984 fits that well. And so we saw this happen to the Soviet Union. We saw this happen to National Socialist Germany, where they ended up essentially driving off the best and the brightest who would have been potentially capable of building an economy capable of enriching them for the future. But the thing is, it goes further than that, because the socialists can't just, mind you, that's almost everything is to take over the businesses, the farms, and the factories. But that's not enough for them. They also have to bend art and science to their will as well. And via the same issues, the people who are, especially talking in the science areas, the people who are willing to talk out about what they see as bad decisions coming through are quickly either eliminated or relegated to areas where they don't have influence. And so you get the illusion of science moving forward. But as looking at the Soviet Union, most of their advances came from stealing technology from other people. They were very capable at crunching the numbers, and their scientists and engineers could do a decent job looking at something somebody else built and replicating it. But rapid advancement on things rarely occurred. In fact, most of what we know about the Soviet economy through the years, in the end, and once we're able to look at the numbers, the West completely overestimated what the Soviets were actually doing on a year-to-year basis. That's why when the Soviet Union finally collapsed, everyone was in shock, because all the projections that we were using said, hey, they can do this indefinitely, and they'll just keep going on forever into the future. Of course, that's assuming the CIA estimates that we got to see are the only estimates they made, and that they didn't have more clandestine estimates that were more accurate, which would be interesting to see someday. So an issue, and I mentioned social democrats in that socialist video I mentioned earlier. Social democrats are a basically a historical adjunct to the socialist and Marxist movements of the 1800s. What had happened was the socialists, Marxists, anarchists, all the various people who were agitating for that kind of governmental change were expecting to see a particular form of economic setup followed by revolutions. Everyone kind of thought the 1848 revolutions of Europe were the big one. And what happened is a lot of the governments of Europe saw the revolutions and realized, yeah, we need to do some pressure relief here. And so they did some liberalizing of their economies. And what this allowed, essentially what they did was they adopted some of the socialist ideas in order to kind of give a trade-off to the people. Where it's like, okay, well, we're giving in a little bit here. We'll give you retirement programs, and we'll give you widow pensions and stuff like that. And so what this caused was the the socialists ended up having a major schism at this point, where the radical agitators said, no, we got to keep going forward to revolution. And the other group basically formed what we know as the Social Democrat movement, where they decided that they were going to advance socialism via legislation, and they expected it to take a very long time. Now, one of the things that happens is because of the duration, how long it takes Social Democrats to get their policies in place, it has the veneer of peacefulness. But what ends up happening is the violence is actually spread over time, so that it doesn't look quite as bad as it would if you tried to do all those revolutionary things in one at one point. We can see various elements of society starting to rebel against the social democrat incursion. Farmers in Holland right now are clearly not happy with the way things are going. Now, they may not be truly anti-socialist in their ideology, but they aren't happy with the direction things are going. It's a example of the Social Democrats taking it one step too far. We saw similar things in France with the Yellow Vest movement, and I expect we'll see a little bit more of that as the Social Democrats feel the urge to keep pushing forward. And obviously, one of the things we're seeing now is the pendulum is swinging in the opposite direction. So the march of social democrats might be, at least for a while, slowed down. I don't count on it being reversed, because historically, what has happened is whenever the left oversteps, the right takes over, but the right never creates their own revolution. They at best undo some of the most extreme things and bring it back to a area of balance that's maybe 5 or 10 years prior to when the leftist overstep started occurring. But ultimately, even the social democrats, with their slow plodding forward, eventually create the same problems that their radical brethren create with these one fell swoop revolutions. They end up causing people to either give up or snap, where they say, okay, we're not doing this anymore. It's not worth being a farmer under these conditions. It's not worth being a businessman under these conditions. It's not worth manufacturing and producing things under these conditions. So ultimately, all socialism ends up in the same place: violence, poverty, mediocrity. Well, I appreciate you listening in with me tonight. Uh, look forward to my future videos, and anyone who is watching, feel free to comment. I do read the comments, and if you have any ideas on videos, commentary you want to see, let me know. I do, history, economics, politics, a little bit of philosophy. Lots of things catch my attention. So if there's anything out there that you're kind of curious about, just leave a comment, and I'll try to see if it's something I can handle. I will make a video out of it. All right. Thank you very much.